On KTN Prime, we begin tonight with what is no doubt one of the most historically significant speeches ever made by President Mwai Kibaki. Just about 5 hours ago, the president addressed Parliament for the last time before he retires after 49 years in politics.
The president retraced his numerous steps and placed a challenge on the leaders seeking to replace him. KTN's Aaron Nocheng will have that story in a short while. But moving on to another story here, the president's speech marked the beginning of the end for a long career that has seen many ups and downs. But just how will friend and foe remember Kenya's third president?
KTN's Rita Tinina now looks back on President Kibaki's public life and what historians might say about him in the future.
Kama huyo ni bure kabisa, anahitaji kutwagwa makofi.
Ni pubafu kabisa. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Some of the statements that have defined the presidency of Emilio Mwai Kibaki, Kenya's longest-serving member of parliament, now in his final term. It has been a long journey for the 81-year-old. The Makerere University and the prestigious London School of Economics graduate first ventured into the murky world of politics in 1960 after quitting his job as an assistant economics lecturer at the Makerere University to become a KANU chief executive officer. 3 years later, he made his debut in elective politics. He contested the Donholm seat on a KANU ticket and won. There was no turning back. The first time in Parliament, Kibaki was appointed to cabinet as Minister for Commerce and Industry in 1965. 5 years later, he was moved to the crucial finance docket, which he held for 13 years. Kibaki had since moved his political base from Donholm to Othaya after facing serious competition from Jael Mbogo, but his political star was on the rise. He became vice president in 1978 when Daniel Moi took over power following the death of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. He still kept his finance portfolio. Having served in both the Kenyatta and Moi regimes, Kibaki was seen as a good student of Kenyatta and Moi and a systems man. It therefore came as no surprise when he dismissed the agitation for the reintroduction of multi-party politics. As an insider in government, Kibaki did not take part in the fight for multi-partyism. But as the clamor for multi-party politics reached fever pitch in the early 1990s, Kibaki, in a surprise move, resigned from KANU in December 1991 and quickly jumped on the opposition bandwagon. Critics dismissed him as an opportunist who had taken advantage of the situation, unlike leading opposition figures Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Kenneth Matiba. He founded the Democratic Party, on whose ticket he would take a shot at the presidency in 1992. He was not lucky. 5 years later, he was at it again and came second to Daniel Arap Moi and became the leader of the official opposition. Perhaps having learnt their lesson, the opposition changed tact. Kibaki's DP joined hands with Charity Ngilu and the late Kijana Wamalwa to form the NAK. The coalition got a big boost from KANU rebels, led by Raila Odinga, who joined hands to form the National Rainbow Coalition. Kibaki was third time lucky in 2002, becoming Kenya's third president.
Naapa kwamba nitatenda kazi zangu za urais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
He took over power on the platform of economic revival following years of ruin under KANU.
Hata kama husemi yale tumefanya yanajulikana.
10 years later, even critics admit the Kibaki era has its share of successes. The country has recorded economic growth and infrastructure development never seen before in the country. And after years of agitation, a new constitution is in place. In the education sector lies another chapter of Kibaki's achievements, free primary education. But his record has been tainted by episodes of national pain. His second term began on the back of a disputed election result that plunged Kenya into one of the darkest hours. And that post-election violence tag refuses to go away, even in the sunset days of his presidency. It was under his watch that the country grappled with some of the worst corruption scandals, such as the Anglo-leasing saga. Insecurity has been a headache for the Kibaki administration. Ethnic tensions and the ever-lacking danger of terror still remain priority. Critics say his presidency has not reflected the broad-based nationalistic outlook that NARC represented, with claims of tribalized appointments to key offices. His style of leadership has also provided fodder for political analysts and critics, some dismissing him as aloof and hands-off. Proponents of his style, however, say he is a man who delegates. One thing is for sure, Kibaki has kept off media interviews, only granting one in his 10-year reign. And of course, that rare news conference to address pressing family matters.
I want to make it very clear that I have only one dear wife, Lucy, who's here, and I do not have any other.
For the man who was in 1974 named by the Time magazine as one of the top 100 people in the world with the potential to lead, Emilio Mwai Kibaki exits the scene with many of his dreams accomplished. But with a hotly contested race to succeed him, Mwai Kibaki will be hoping that his exit will not be as acrimonious as the start to his second term as president. Rita Tinina, KTN, Nairobi.
Thanks, Rita, for that. Now, just about 5 hours ago, the president addressed Parliament for the last time before he retires after 49 years in politics. The president retraced his numerous steps and placed a challenge on the leaders seeking to replace him. KTN's Aaron Ochieng with our comprehensive coverage of that beginning of the end for Kenya's longest-serving member of Parliament.
After 49 years of service as Member of Parliament, the curtain finally comes down on a legacy that President Kibaki leaves behind as the longest-serving Member of Parliament in Kenya's history. President Kibaki this afternoon delivered his farewell speech to Parliament and the nation at large as a Member of Parliament before he retires from active politics. Of the 49 years as Member of Parliament, he has served 10 as both the President and MP and another 10 as Vice President. A packed August House listened keenly as President paid tribute to Parliament's role in the governance of the country.
I would also like to salute all those members of Parliament who have served our country since our independence. I take this opportunity to wish you success in all your future endeavors.
His speech in a house that he first stepped in when he was just 31 years old also touched on the need for Kenyans to elect competent and development-oriented leaders. Kibaki was grateful to the people of Othaya and Donholm who elected him to be their Member of Parliament.
For the first time in nearly 50 years, I will not be on any election ballot paper.
Kibaki, who was first elected as Member of Parliament in 1963, has been Vice President under retired President Daniel Moi, served in various ministries of finance, home affairs and health, before going to the opposition and becoming Democratic Party leader. His last 5 years in office came up for a special mention.
I would like to once again thank this august House for its support to the Grand Coalition government over the last 5 years that enabled us to serve the people of Kenya.
Parliamentarians also paid glowing tribute to the Kibaki legacy as a Member of Parliament.
In Africa, leaders leave office when they are least popular. If today an opinion poll, a genuine opinion poll was carried out, I think Your Excellency will be scoring over 90%.
And although I have never had occasion to vote for His Excellency. I must say that I appreciate the exemplary performance that he has shown.
He would not allow to be part of any political gossips. I would like to encourage all other members of parliament now to really emulate his example in leadership.
I very much miss his contributions in the House, both sides of the House, whether as leader of government business or as a leader in the opposition. So I also join my fellow members of parliament to wish you a long life, but continue to give service to this nation.
Unless Parliament decides to extend its sitting, it will start its Christmas break at the end of business tomorrow, and the President is expected to dissolve the 10th Parliament on the 28th of January 2013, meaning tomorrow may be the last day that the current Parliament will have a sitting. For 49 years, President Kibaki has been making way through this corridor as Member of Parliament and 10 years as President. But from today onwards, should he be coming back here, he will be an ordinary citizen. Aaron Ochen, KTN at Parliament Buildings.
49 years later. Now, despite the mixed record on the national front, in Othaya, President Kibaki will largely be remembered in glowing terms. Many of his constituents have never known any other member of parliament, but for the first time now, they will have to think about an alternative MP. KTN Central Kenya reporter Carol Nderi has more from Nyeri.
Karibu Othaya. The welcoming words that usher you to Othaya constituency in Nyeri County, a constituency that has known no other member of parliament for 38 years. President Mwai Kibaki having led his Othaya constituents since 1974, making him the longest serving member of parliament in Kenya.
Kwangu tangu nizaliwe sijaona MP mwingine na tunatarajia mwenye atarudi at least atakuwa na loho.
The youth and the elderly alike shower praises on a man they say has developed Othaya immensely, from the dusty rural town that it was to the model constituency that it is, the tarmac roads snaking all through the constituency. This level 4 hospital currently under construction.
Kibaki anaendelea mzuri. Barabara shukuru hospitali
shule mzuri ya bure na sisi tunafurahi ni kazi yake.
Munga Gishuki was Kibaki's classmate at KTN Primary School and recalls the academic wit that the president held then.
Tulikuwa tukisoma na Kibaki shule ya KTN.
Having led the area for 38 years, were there no other contenders?
Ndio tunaishi na yeye bila kuchagua mwingine. Hata akitakikana tunamkataa mwingine, yani tuongozwe na ukweli.
The mood in Othaya is palpable, most saddened by his departure and praying for a leader who will fit in his shoes.
Hatujafurahia kuondoka kwake, tunaweza omba aendelee sana, lakini kwa vile miaka yake imeisha, tutasema tu asante.
Hopefuls who are eyeing the Othaya MP seat are political activist Mary Wamboi, lawyer Peter Kingara, businessman Gishuki Mugambi. Others are Emilio Kibue, Esau Kioni, and Ringaru Gishani. For 38 years that President Mwai Kibaki has been member of parliament for Othaya constituency since 1974, most of these constituents have known no other leader, and perhaps their humble message to the next leader, please continue with the good precedents set before. Carol Nderi for KTN in Othaya constituency, Nyeri County.
Thanks, Carol. News just in from Eastleigh. One person is feared dead and several reportedly injured in multiple explosions in Eastleigh this evening. The blasts occurred just after 8 p.m. near Al Amin Mosque within the densely populated estate. Witnesses say they heard 2 successive blasts near the mosque, and this prompted people to scamper for safety. It is so unclear whether the explosives were planted at the scene or hurled by passers-by. Rescue teams are at the scene attending to the injured. We will definitely keep you posted and updated on this developing story as more details come in. To other news of the day, many historians will perhaps say that the president has not been particularly good with reading speeches, but they may have a different verdict when it comes to his off-the-cuff remarks. Let's now take a look at some of the speeches that made the Kibaki presidency.
Maana unakuwa na maana gani duniani ikiwa wewe kazi yako ni wizi wa ng'ombe? Kweli una maana gani? Huna maana, wewe ni binadamu ya mavi ya kuku. Hii mvua itakuwa ni kidogo, wewe hapana. Hata gari yangu naona inatoroka yeye bure. Mwambie arudi nyuma. Ni pubafu kabisa.
Na kuna mwenyewe hapa, au ni mama au ni baba, angali anajivuna kutembea mbele ya watu na hana aibu. Mtu kama huyo ni bure kabisa, anahitaji kutwagwa makofi.
Na usije ukiwa popote ukishakula pombe. Ukweli ni kwamba hakuna haja wewe kula pombe hata ndio ukaneneme juu ya mtu wako. Hiyo wacha. Hiyo wacha. Na mukule pombe huko mkiwa peke yenu.
Ikiwa unataka fujo, ndio tokea, tunataka kukuona. Lazima wa kila mtu, hakuna, hatutaki kuogopa yeyote. Yeyote ambaye hataki maendeleo mazuri, awe anataka kujenga Kenya yake, hiyo tutafuata na yeye atawacha tu.
If you just hang around and don't register, you are useless. No, true. You can't be useful. You can't be any use. Now, I think you are just... Anyway, let me not say that.
Sio lazima wewe kila siku ya pili ya tatu ati lazima uproduce mtoto. What the hell? Hapana. Hiyo ni kukoza adabu.
Some of those speeches are just hilarious, and that story brings us to a big question tonight. We are asking your views on Kibaki's legacy, and we are asking, what are your memories of Kibaki's presidency?
So what do you remember about Kibaki? Send your brief comments to our SMS number 8040, and we'll sample some of them at the end of this live newscast.
They would love to know what you think. Now, to the men and women seeking to replace President Kibaki. And we turn to the confusion in the Jubilee House. It is now emerging that Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi committed himself to a nomination process after signing the gentleman's agreement with Uhuru Kenyatta.
KTN has learned that documents deposited with the Registrar of Political Parties did not contain the agreement to have Uhuru relinquish the presidential ticket for Mudavadi. So just where does the Sabatia Member of Parliament go from here?
Well, KTN Samugina takes a closer look.
The Deputy Prime Minister is on the spot for rescinding his decision from a deal relinquishing his presidential bid in favor of Musalia Mudavadi. Uhuru Kenyatta claiming the deal was a product of coercion by dark forces rather than willingness.
Shetani ambaye hata hajui kazi hiyo tulianzisha namna gani. Wanakuja wanasema sasa unajua sasa nyinyi mkienda hivyo mmejitangaza, unajua sasa wazungu hawatatupatia pesa.
Just a day after claims of signing the pact under duress, details emerging from party insiders indicate that powerful forces based at the Kenyatta International Conference Center piled pressure on Uhuru to shelve his candidacy. Equally, the insiders claim a senior civil servant orchestrated the signing of the secret Uhuru Mudavadi deal. Also at play was a State House operative and another with close ties to State House.
Inawezekanaje kufanya harusi bila madelegati? Heri niwe peke yangu.
The fear then, an Uhuru Ruto candidacy will polarize the country, and to defuse this, they required a compromise candidate to give the Jubilee outfit a national outlook, especially after NARC leader Charity Ngilu bolted to the CORD coalition.
Whether it be that agreement was entered into through coercion, undue influence, blackmail, or whatsoever kind of duress, we as a party do say we are not a party to it.
He had decided to withdraw his candidature and wished to support me as the coalition candidate.
Nonetheless, the coalition addendum at the Register of Political Parties that binds both parties provides for a nomination contest between TNA and UDF. Clause 1 of the addendum reads in part, the presidential candidate of the coalition who shall be nominated from TNA or UDF within 14 days of the execution of this addendum. Meanwhile, the Uhuru Mudavadi deal remains in the hands of the lawyers and not deposited at the registrar's office, which is now being dismissed as a mere gentleman's agreement.
Even the documents deposited at Rusi's office, if you are not a gentleman enough, you can still walk out of it. There are ways of justifying as to why you cannot live by that.
The Jubilee Alliance appears set to move forward with the coalition national delegates meeting to pick its presidential candidate without Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi. But a section of TNA MPs are calling for a ceasefire on the attacks on Mudavadi. MPs in the Mudavadi camp are accusing the Uhuru Ruto team of using Mudavadi as a pawn to weaken Prime Minister Raila Odinga's numerical strength. Samogina, KTN Prime.
Right now to that exclusive poll by Ipsos and the Standard Group. The poll conducted in all of Nairobi's constituencies suggests that Bishop Margaret Wanjiru and Makadara Member of Parliament Mike Sonko are some of the most popular politicians in the city. The poll indicates that Sonko, who is running for the Senate, would easily win if an election were called today. Bishop Wanjiru, who is seeking the governor's seat, also has a slim margin against her closest rival, Ferdinand Waititu. Sophia Wanuna now takes us through some of the figures. Sophia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Let's now begin with a look at the most pressing problems in Nairobi County, and majority of the city's residents ranked insecurity as the most pressing problem at 32%. This, of course, associated with the recent cases of insecurity in the country. Lack of employment, high cost of living, corruption, water problems and bad roads are the other issues Kenyans want addressed. The voter registration closed yesterday, and according to the poll, 97% of Nairobi County residents intend to vote in the 4th March general election. Let's move on to the next board. And in the last few weeks, several political alliances have been formed, and 52% of Nairobians favor the CORD alliance that is made up of Raila Odinga's ODM, Kalonzo Musyoka's Wiper Democratic Movement, and Moses Wetangula's Ford Kenya. And the Jubilee Alliance comes second at 39%, an alliance currently made up of Uhuru Kenyatta's TNA, William Ruto's URP, and Musalia Mudavadi's UDF. Peter Kenneth and Raphael Tuju's alliance is third in popularity, followed by Pambazuka and Martha Karua, who is going it alone. Now, as for the knowledge of the electable political positions in the country, only 44% on the bottom of that list are aware that they will be voting in a woman representative, and 50% know about the county assembly ward representative position. Moving on, Margaret Wanjiru is the most popular candidate in the gubernatorial race. Respondents said that what they like most about her is that she has a good development track record and good planning skills. She's at the top there. Those who do not support her say that she mixes politics and religion.
Ferdinand Waitito is second favorite, followed by Evans Kidero. On the Senate contest, Mike Mbuvi alias Sonko is preferred candidate, standing at 59%. His supporters describe him as generous and charitable towards the community, while those against his senatorial candidature say he is childish. Fred Gumo was ranked second. And finally, Rachel Shebesh is the most popular candidate for the woman representative position at 25%. And although Elizabeth Ngoro has expressed interest in the Senate seat, there is a perception that she is running for the woman rep position, as she is ranked second with a 10%. So there you have it. I now hand you over for more on this and more analysis on this political polls and what we're likely to see. Our Eric Njoka is standing by in Studio B.
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Sophia. Now what we're going to do is crunch the numbers and know the statistics as they are. And joining me now in studio is Ipsos Synovate Managing Director Margaret Ireri, just to tell us what has been done and how they came about, the figures. And just to recap what they've said, majority of the city's residents ranked insecurity as the most pressing problem at 32%. Before I go to Nairobi County, first of all, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Just before we go to Nairobi County, they just concluded voter registration. Your thoughts about it, in brief?
I think it would be interesting to see the final numbers that are published by the IEBC, because when we did an opinion poll about 2 weeks ago, the intention to vote, the intention to register was high, probably over 90%. But the reality is what we'll actually see in the final IEBC voter register. So I'm keen to compare intention vis-a-vis action.
97%. Let's now come back to Nairobi County. 97% of those people registered for the March 4th elections. Why this gap? Why this big gap with Nairobi City? Why is it so much focused with opinion polls? Why is it always on the limelight? Why is this county so big? What is the importance of this?
For, of course, obvious reasons. Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya, and even if you look at the infrastructure and the way the country sits, a lot of the resources, offices are actually based in Nairobi. And I would imagine if I want to take a seat across the country, I'll probably want to be in Nairobi because that's where the hub of the country is.
Why is it called the Bethwether County of political, intrigues? Why so? Why is everyone wanting to just go to Nairobi, and I want to be known through Nairobi, the Bethwether County?
But I would imagine that if you are in Nairobi, or let's say you take a very strategic role in Nairobi like a governor or senator, visually it's a very prominent position, and assuming that you can deliver for Nairobi County, it would give you a very good platform to the next political position. And after being governor of Nairobi, what's next? Perhaps the presidency.
With the recent polls, viewers, we sampled some of them. We asked people what they thought about the opinion polls, and this is what they had to say.
Kwa maoni yangu, kama Wanjiru ama Sonko wakisimama, nitapigia Wanjiru. Juu ninampenda kulingana na ile kazi ametufanyia, na mimi constituency mimi natoka constituency yake. Amefanya kazi mzuri sana.
Kuna upinzani wa karibu sana, kwa sababu ukiangalia Wanjiru na Mbaru, Mbaru also ni mzito kwa kuwa governor na anajulikana vizuri sana vile ameendesha biashara zake.
Mtu kama Mike Sonko, he uses all his money on the poor. So why not elect such a person?
Nairobi ni the most sensitive county, na inataka senator ambayo ataiendelesha vizuri. Na sisi kama wapiga kura, tukimake mistake this start of the first time to have the senator wa Nairobi, tuchague mtu ambaye ana maono, tutaachwa nyuma siku nyingi sana.
Lakini Mama Wanjiru, because of the faith he has as a Christian, she can manage the finances, hata kuwa kijaribu kutunyang'anya vitu.
Well, there you have it. Those are what that is what people are saying actually about the opinion poll. Let's now come to you. People are saying that opinion polls are biased. What's the eligibility of opinion polls in the country?
I believe that if an opinion poll is done scientifically, it can be able to predict behavior. And what we've done over the past few years and across the Market and Social Research Association, we've actually come up with standards for opinion polling, and it is very scientific. Now, opinion polling is a new thing in Kenya, it's a new thing in Nairobi, and it will take a bit of time before Nairobians or Kenyans can understand the methodology. But the true test of an opinion poll is when you measure the opinion poll's results before an actual election outcome, and you see what we were able to predict. So,
but how can you question the methodology of opinion polls when you have only 800 people, 1,600 people being interviewed in a whole county?
The issue is not the size of the sample. The issue is how you're able to distribute the sample. If you can be able to distribute it scientifically, maybe across the various demographics as the population sits, if you can be able to distribute it across the various constituencies as the population sits, then that becomes a scientific sample. So it's not the number, it's actually how you distribute it. An example of the US, you can imagine the population there, it's humongous, over 250 million, but they take a sample of 1,000 and they're able to predict voter behavior.
Hold on. Let me just take you back to what you said in your opinion poll. You said that this is one of the counties with no voter apathy, no single party dominates in this county. Males are being the majority than females. And also you say that low knowledge of electable, positions. Awareness. Let's talk about awareness. And then you have a mixture of methodology and awareness. People who don't know who they're going to vote for, people who are not sure if they're going to vote. How do you carry out both at a time?
Okay, there's an issue of awareness and there's an issue of probing. So if I come to you and I ask you, who do you vote for if elections are to be held today for a particular position, I wait for your spontaneous response. You tell me and I record it. Assuming you do not know, I record do not know. So we are able to gauge whether awareness is low by recording don't know. And what you're finding out in this study, and this is Nairobi, the capital city, awareness of electable positions is quite low. Knowledge of whom they will vote for beyond the presidential level is quite low. And honestly, that is worrying, especially since you're talking about Nairobi as a key and the hub of Kenya.
So political alliances formed 59%. Is that so? 59% of your vote or your tally. ODM stood out. So many questions are asking. Nairobi County, ODM stood out. Margaret Wanjiru stood out as the position for governor. We had Mike Sonko standing as senator, and he stood out. And we have always we've had a problem also with Mike Sonko and Ferdinand, being under case or being investigated, and saying that they are not eligible to stand as governor or senator. Will this affect come general election in March 4th? Will this affect? Because it's a mixture of everything. Everyone is talking about this and that. Yeah.
I think there are two issues here. There's the issue of a political party. At the point where you're voting a governor or a senator or a member of parliament, will a political party alliance or affiliation affect the voter patterns? If you look at the survey we just done, people seem to be affiliated to a particular political party. But when it comes to choosing a particular candidate at governor or senator level, they do not necessarily look at them based on the party they come from. They look at them as individuals. And that's the kind of assessment you're having. That's number one. Number two, there's a belief by supporters that if I support a particular individual, regardless of what other people say, I believe is the right candidate. So that's why you're seeing maybe candidates or aspirants that are surprising to you actually being ranked quite highly. But what matters is that, do I feel that my candidate can represent me when they get into government? And when people vote for, let's say, Margaret Wanjiru, for Ferdinand Waititu, Sonko and all that, they're actually looking for an attribute within that candidate that they actually support. So the question is, number one, political party will it affect? I don't think it's affecting the voter choice, but it's individuals, leadership attributes and other attributes that are affecting the voter in terms of who they will vote for.
Before I ask my last question, we had on graphics, we say 29% of people for TNA, or for CORD, I beg your pardon, but it's actually 59% of that. We apologize for that. Now, before we go to the next question, let me just ask this. Synovate is out, to educate people about the numbers and also about the percentages, and also about how to vote in the next general elections. Many people are saying that these opinion polls should be stopped, and opinion polls will cause a rift when elections are held. What's your thought about this?
We've been through this journey of whether opinion polls should be done or not. And there's quite a long process and detailed process about regulating opinion polls. And there's actually a law in place that has set out standards and rules and regulation about opinion polls. Most importantly, they say 7 days prior to an actual election event, we should not release any opinion polls. And we're already adhering to that.
And we've come to the end of this interview. I'll hand you over back to Linda. That has been Margaret Ireri, the Managing Director of Ipsos Synovate. Linda, over to you.
Eric Njoka with Nairobi Politics and the polls and what people are looking for in the leaders, what they hope to achieve. The killings took place on the night of 11th of March 2010 along Naivasha Road in Kawangware. Angel Katusia has more.
This was the crime scene 2 years ago. 7 taxi drivers gunned down in cold blood in Kawangware, supposedly for disobeying police orders. The 6 police officers on patrol that fateful night were Ahmed Omar, Ahmed Abdallah Shafi, Michael Lewa, Moses Lochich, Nelson Kipchirchir, and Eric Obere. They had been charged with murder, and today High Court Judge Fred Ocheng sentenced them to death, having been found guilty of 7 counts of murder.
The appropriate sentence on all the counts is death as by law prescribed.
In his judgment, Justice Ocheng said there was no doubt all the 7 drivers were killed by bullets and that all the officers confirmed they were within the area of the killing and were all armed with guns loaded with ammunition. Though the court could not establish who fired the bullets at the taxi drivers, it concluded that the 6 APs had similar intentions. He went further to say though the court appreciates the role of the police in trying to maintain law and order, they are not supposed to take lives but protect them. In their defense, the administration police officers claimed the victims had fired bullets at them, that they were armed with crude weapons and had the intention to harm them, but the judge asserted if the taxi drivers had fired at the police, at least one of them would have sustained injuries. After the judge delivered the verdict, relatives of the officers broke into tears. It was a verdict they were not ready for. On the other side, it was joy for relatives of the deceased taxi drivers.
And now my heart is in peace because the culprits who killed my brother have been brought to book.
Imeendelea vizuri sababu hatuwezi kusema koti imependelea upande wowote.
Police have in many occasions been blamed for brutality. Justice Philip Ransley, in his report, called for a makeover of the Kenya police into a police service after allegations of extrajudicial killings and police involvement in the 2007 post-poll kills. Angel Katusia, KTN Prime.
Now to a new twist in the country's search for the first Inspector General of Police. 2 constitutional commissions are faulting the President and Prime Minister for nominating only men to the 3 top jobs in the service.
The Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution and the Gender and Equality Commissions want Parliament to step in and resolve the anomaly. KTN's Patrick Amimo has more.
The Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security vetted David Kimayo, the front-runner for the post of Inspector General of the Kenya Police Service. The committee is to table its report in Parliament for consideration. Should Kimayo get Parliament's nod, he says fighting corruption will be key on his things to do list.
We shall be able to address the corruption with a lot of seriousness that it deserves. That the law must take its own course naturally, direct.
It has taken long to have the new command structure for the Kenya Police Service in place, but even as the process seemed to reach its conclusion, the issue of gender came in, with the CIC and IPOA demanding that Section 14 of the National Police Service Act must be adhered to. Section 14B of the National Police Service Act states that in the entire recruitment and appointment process of the Inspector General or Deputy Inspector Generals, the Commission Parliament and President must ensure that at all times one of the three positions is of the opposite gender. However, the Constitution does not give Parliament power to vet those nominated for the Deputy Inspector General.
To the extent that the Act requires that at least one of the three must be of the opposite gender, so the three need to be looked at holistically.
Now that we have an Inspector General who is a man, we must be aware that under Section 14 of the National Police Service Act, the two deputies, one of them must be a woman.
And perhaps what is causing more concern are reports that there is an attempt to amend the National Police Service Act by deleting Section 14.
Those who have initiated the proposed amendments must be exposed and held accountable.
The amendment seeks to remove the two-third gender principle. We urge parliamentarians to reject this offensive amendment in its entirety.
Sources had indicated that the current CID Director Ndegwa Muhoro has been chosen to be the Deputy Inspector General of the Kenya Police, while the current Administration Police Commandant Samuel Arachi becomes the Deputy for APs. Stakeholders now want Kibaki and Raila to reconsider the nominees.
There is absolutely no reason why there would be a delay even beyond today, because the names are there.
Patrick Amimo, KTN Prime.
Glad you're with us. You're watching KTN Prime. Time for a short break, but...
Well, a very warm welcome to this edition of Prime Business Today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Betty Kialom. Now, a warrant to attach and sell assets worth 1 billion shillings belonging to the National Cereals and Produce Board over a debt has been issued. Errant suppliers and general contractors got the warrant to attach and sell movable assets of the corporation within 7 days, over 524 million shillings arising from a breached contract. Now, the company is seeking to sell the property, which includes cars and the board's 2 main dryers, to offset the amount and other accrued debts such as lawyers and auctioneer fees following a Court of Appeal ruling. Now, the suppliers were awarded the money after a sole arbitrator found that NCPB breached an agreement in which Errant Suppliers was contracted to supply 40,000 metric tons of white maize in 2004. The board is said to have failed to issue letters of credit to Errant Suppliers to enable them import maize as indicated in the contract. Well, moving on, the Ministry of Industrialization has opened for public scrutiny the scrap metals bill. Well, the bill seeks to regulate and control dealings of scrap metal in the country after increased vandalism has seen railway tracks, advertising boards and street lights become a primary source of metal. Well, KTN's Michael Karanja has the details.
There has been much hand-wringing over the black market trade, but not nearly enough in legislative or practical measures to stem the spate of pilfering in the country. But now the Ministry of Industrialization is working hard on legislation to regulate the scrap metal business, estimated to be worth 2 billion shillings annually. Among the proposals under the new bill is a 1 million shilling fine for those found vandalizing property or even dealing with the metal. The ministry proposes to create a scrap metal council to govern the trade under strict regulatory terms so that there is no easy market for vandalized material. Scrap metal inspectors are also to be introduced to police the origin and sale of scrap metal to ensure it remains legal. Michael Karanja, KTN Business Today.
And moving on, tea and coffee producer Sasini recorded a pre-tax loss of 85.2 million shillings, weighed down by lower global coffee prices and high operating costs. Now, in August, Sasini issued a full-year profit warning, more than a quarter of the 1.01 billion shillings it posted in 2011, while Sasini's revenue rose 4% to 2.78 billion shillings for the year ending September, as Arabica coffee fell to a 2.5-year as low as the global market suffered a glut after a good harvest in Brazil. Sasini announced it would pay a final dividend of 2.05 shillings per share, half of what it paid last year, as its shares rose 3.5% in the stock markets Wednesday. Toyota has agreed to pay a record $17.4 million fine to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the United States of America. Well, it's the largest fine allowed under law for a single investigation. Toyota's troubles stem from a 2012 recall involving one of its Lexus models, the
NTSB says the automaker did not report a safety defect related to its floor mats in the Lexus RX 350 crossover. In a timely manner, the faulty car says that it had a defect. The vehicle's acceleration or pedal causing unwanted acceleration. Toyota once had one of the best reputations for vehicle quality and safety. Time to take a look at the Forex. And that's it for this edition of Prime Business today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Betty Callow. Don't go away. Sadiq Shaban coming up next with the latest sports. Stay tuned.
KTN Business Today. Good evening and welcome to KTN Sports Today. My name is Sadiq Shaban. The Kenya Motorsports Federation clubs have officially taken over the running of the federation from the directors on a transitional basis, pending an election next year. An annual general meeting held today also resolved to increase the number of directors from 7 to 11. The court-mandated annual general meeting of the Kenya Motorsport Federation was largely peaceful and successful according to the delegates, save for a moment when one of the directors stormed out in a huff after learning that he would have to resign his post to pave way for an interim committee to lead the federation to the elections. In fact, sources indicate that 2 other directors followed suit, while 4 resigned voluntarily to hand over the leadership of the federation to a committee led by Mombasa Rally Club chairman Roy Mackenzie.
They took the courage to stand down voluntarily today to allow the clubs, i.e. that is the shareholders of the KMSF, to step up toward being on the board of directors and running the KMSF.
At the same time, the delegates from 11 clubs also mandated the interim committee to oversee the accounts of the federation and to prepare for a special general meeting in January. Additionally, it was unanimously agreed that 4 more directors would join the board.
Those nominees will actually be here at the KMSF, and they will become the new 2013 board of directors of the KMSF.
This effectively places the running and administration of the Motorsport Federation into the hands of the clubs from next year. Elections of the new chairman are expected before February 2013. Elsewhere, Harambee Stars' planned training camp has been postponed to December 27th. This month, the Stars were to begin training camp at Kasarani for the January 5th African Championship return leg match. According to coach James Nandwa, it was decided that the players take a Christmas break and resume training on December 27th for 3 days. They then will break again for New Year festivities before returning to camp, where they will stay till January 5th. The Stars, who lost by a sultry goal in Bujumbura last Sunday, must win the return match by at least 2 goals and ensure that the Burundi Swallows do not score any away goal. Elsewhere, Kenya has again dropped further down in the current Coca-Cola FIFA World Rankings. Kenya, which was ranked position 130 last month, has dropped 4 places to position 134 in the rankings released today. Though Kenya performed very well at this year's CECAFA Senior Challenge Cup, it did not count in any way since the regional tournament is not recognized by FIFA. Kenya has lost 2 international matches, one to Tanzania and the other against South Africa. The Stars have, however, maintained their position 39th in Africa. Spain still remains the best placed team in the world, and as such, there has been no pain in Spain, as many would say. Moving on, Kenya's Wesley Korir and Sharon Girop have become the first athletes to enlist for next year's edition of the Boston Marathon. The race is scheduled for April 13th, and Dew will be seeking to defend their titles they won this year. Korir has had to cope with unusually hot conditions to win this year's race, to win in a comfortable time of 2:12:40, although it was one of his slowest races to date. The victory in itself was the biggest achievement in Korir's career so far. Korir, who has won 2 Los Angeles Marathon, managed to better his personal best to 2:06:13 when finishing 5th at the Chicago Marathon in October. The women's race this year, Boston Marathon, was closer, and Cherop won it in a sprint finish by just a couple of seconds to improve on her 3rd place finish from the year before. Her winning time was 2:31:50, just 3 months before she had clocked a lifetime best of 2:22:39 in Dubai, while just last month in Turin, Italy, she notched up another victory to win comfortably in 2:23:57.